What's up, Kashama?
Peace, family. How y'all doing? How you doing, Cleo?
I'm doing well. And yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Welcome to another broadcast of Melanated Solutions Media. We're coming to you tonight to discuss Black faces in media spaces. You have myself, Kashama Sankofa. We have Brother Duke the Root, as well as Dr. Cleo Monago, and we're ready to get it started. How about y'all, brothers? How y'all feeling?
Feeling well over here. Good evening, everyone. Just want to go over first our family feedback. We actually had two live streams before we had this one. For those who don't know, on August 14th, we had Black Entanglements Part 2. Just going over some of the comments from there. We have from Lyle B. Anthony, a solution is recognizing that a demonstration is a demonstration of power. It is not a sign saying, I am a man, but rather it is about using our collective power to inconvenience the establishment. We also have from Brother A. Williams, can we just go to midnight? We have four Black folks in the intellectual discourse. This is a divine moment. Of course, referring to, we had Dr. Sharice Nelson join us on the 14th. Moving forward on August 21st, for the topic, which way should we go? And for what, with Dr. Cynthia McKinney. Some highlights include Ronald Wesby asking to have, Ronald Westby is asking to have the doctor back on November 3rd or the 4th to discuss the outcome of the elections, which we've already said that we would love to have her back. And from Daryl LC Mock simply says, hey, Sin, love you. So if you would love to catch those particular live streams, you can again find them on Melanated Solutions Media and our Facebook page, as well as our YouTube. With that being said, we're ready to roll into current events. Adam, could you roll clip? Wow.
Well, so what we saw was what we just saw was the narrative from the shooting that just took place. We've also seen, constant rebellion taking place as well in the city. What do y'all have to say about that, Cleo, Duke?
Well, I must admit, I have not. I learned a little bit more than what I actually knew from the package that was just shown, because y'all have been around for a long time, and I've been hearing about Black men and women, but particularly men, being murdered and disfigured since I was a kid, and I did not allow myself to delve into this recent situation because it's painful, and I'm not in the mood to go numb. And because of the lack of solution and all the distractions to solution and all of the white supremacy mythologists' diversionary tactics that get in the way of Black people actually having enough focus to resolve this issue, it's just really heavy on my heart. And I really don't know any of the details except for a brother got shot in the back and a brother is paralyzed. So I couldn't give you a lot of details of my perspective on it in terms of the death, because I don't have any death.
Duke?
I guess similar to Cleo, and mind you, I'm much younger, but as someone who's kind of used to this narrative now, there is a little bit of a numbness that I recognize. And for this particular incident, I did my hardest to try to stay away from some of the information, just because it's already a lot going on, and we're not at the solution point yet. as a collective for us to really solve this particular problem. But I do know I don't know if I saw in the clip, but one of the things that I know came out much more recently is the 17-year-old white terrorist who went along to cause havoc during the protests.
Didn't he kill somebody?
He killed 2 people, injured a third. To my knowledge, the 2 people who he killed, the last I checked, both of them happened to be white individuals.
And also, you know, I know from our viewpoint, he went to cause havoc, but from his viewpoint and from the viewpoint of a lot of other people, especially white people, the president included, he was going to keep law and order, not to raise havoc, but to quell the havoc. What we see as uprisings of Black and oppressed people, they see as havoc and a threat to their status quo and so-called law and order. And that's what he went to go do. And he was actually encouraged by law enforcement. He wasn't the only one. There are white militia and white supremacist, white nationalist organizations that have been given the green light by law enforcement or told to go in and help keep law and order. And some of them are actually members of law enforcement there themselves. So speaking of lack of solutions, though, I don't know if any of you noticed that there was a march today in Washington, I guess in response to the violence, to the murders. Did y'all see it?
I've seen some of it, yes.
I heard about there being a march on Washington scheduled for today, wasn't it?
Yeah, it happened today.
Yeah, and I haven't seen it, but I did know that it occurred.
Well, Reverend Al Sharpton, I believe, was central to it. I don't want to say if he led it or not, but they had the family members of the brother who was shot in Kenosha, Jacob Blake. They had his father, his sister as well. I saw Sabrina Fulton in the background. She didn't speak to my knowledge. And they also had the Floyd family. But what's interesting to me is that, you know, these marches tend to just be a chance for Black people to just kind of vent. And it's really not leading to anything. And it also serves another purpose, which I think is to water down and to derail the resistance against our tyranny that we're seeing happen organically already. I saw it was specifically Jacob Blake's sister, I believe it was. She spoke, and the sister started out, you know, making a lot of sense. And then next thing I know, she started talking about group economics. And yeah, I'm a fan of group economics. I want Black people to practice group economics. But I know that's not what was going to stop us from being killed by these cops, like, you know, right now. You know what I'm saying? So I think that there's a lot of diversions and deflections going on with movements like that, massive marches and stuff these days. It's a bit outdated and archaic for where we are in history. I don't know if y'all agree or not.
I want to say, so I won't feed into anybody having paralysis in response to the perpetual murder of Black people, with emphasis on Black men. I want to say to people who heard me talk about I didn't go into debt, to people understand that I'm a worker, I'm an activist. My whole life is committed to doing what I can among Black people to get us to be more proactive and get us to be less sitting ducks for white supremacy and be more involved in developing our communities and our children toward being more defensive, more learn how to decode and how to live in this society less passively, but actively countering white supremacy and its messaging. So I'm not just avoiding these events and going somewhere and sitting down somewhere. I'm busy, and I'm too busy doing what I do to get caught up in the murder of somebody else or the shooting of somebody else that the community is not prepared to really successfully resist. So I want to say that. I don't want people to think I'm paralysis, in some state of paralysis, doing nothing. I'm not built that way, and I never could do nothing. What comes to mind regarding this march, that's another event I don't know a lot of details about, but I do know that whether he realizes it or not, he being Al Sharpton, his job is to be a diversion. His job is to create illusions of activity that's allegedly relevant to keep Black people from defending themselves and being awake and thoughtful and actively involved in the defense and empowerment and preemptive strikes on Black folks. People like Al Sharpton, who I know, so I'm not talking about somebody who I don't know. Black people get used, and some of us enjoy the limelight so much that we're enjoying it and like the attention, but don't realize that when we only have one person considered a leader, that puts us in a weak position. The system of white supremacy, the myth of it all, has been so enduring is because they have multiple leaders, multiple approaches, multiple tactics, multiple strategies, and multiple folks doing multiple things, including the media. And we have Al Sharpton for the 20,000th year, while people still get murdered, which clearly shows that this one old, ancient approach leader, this strategy is not working. But white folks are the ones who allow certain people to be at the top of the media chain when it comes to optical attention. And that's another thing that Black people need to take a look at. If people are well known for years while nothing changes, we need to take a look at who keeps on keeping them well known while nothing changes. I don't see what kind of powerful transformative activity is going to come out of this march, but maybe I'll hear in the news that a bunch of Black folks got together and learned how to strategically resist the myth of white supremacy and defend Black people at that event, as opposed to being a whole bunch of talking. But maybe that's what I'll hear, that it was a great event that was different than what I expect.
I don't think you're going to hear that, but yeah, I mean, I didn't attend. I mean, I didn't have any plans to, but I got a phone call from a friend who was in the DMV area and asked me if I would be there. And I was just like, no, I'm not interested in doing that. Not interested in standing around thousands of people during a pandemic, to sit up and just listen to the same reactionary narratives. And really, where nothing specific is really being said, it's like a big church service where people just kind of yell cliches and say things that rhyme, and it can make you feel good if you're on that surface level of resistance. But if you are at a place where deep down you are ready for this, I was about to cuss. Deep down, you're ready for this ish to end, and you don't want no more of generations going through it. If you're actually pissed at the fact that people were doing the exact same thing decades ago. In 1963, Black people were marching on Washington to be treated like humans. And now in 2020, you got the nerve to want me to march to be treated like a human? No, we're going to try another route this time. And I think that's where most of this generation is headed, I think. But it is a struggle in controlling the narrative.
Likely one of the goals of this event is to push the Democratic Party leader, which is, as we all know, Biden. And that's going to be likely the real agenda of this event, is a Democratic Party promotional campaign.
Yeah, well, there was definitely a lot of that narrative. Get out and vote. Make sure you vote. Of course, nobody said Biden. But
everybody did. Oh, okay.
You don't have. That's been the signal ever since I've been voting. Vote or die. Nobody tells you who to vote for. It's just understood, like Joe Biden said. If you got to figure out who to vote for, then you ain't Black. That's been the narrative ever since I've been voting. And nobody has to say vote Democrat. Nobody has to say vote for Biden. It's just understood if you Black. And we tell you to vote, and you're going to vote, and we know how you're going to vote.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting. I mean, this is somewhat tangential, but I think it's interesting, at least optically, the amount of Black men that Trump seems to have galvanized in his support. And that there was 7% of the last count I heard. I didn't do my own research. I'm going by what I heard. Last was that 7%. Yeah. Of Black men will be supporting Trump. And again, there's so much nuance to that. And my own analysis of that is so leveled that I don't know if there's time to get into that in our 8:30 time.
We're doing very good with time, just so you know, Cleo.
Okay, but we need to. I think we need to take a look at why black men, what's going on with black men in this country. And I think
that we do a show on black male political behavior. So I think that's something we should delve into at some point in the future.
Yeah, somebody need to, because everybody else is scared to have the conversation. I've been on high profile and medium profile shows where when I bring it up, you can hear red, black, and green crickets.
Well, I think the number is actually higher, black men that are supporting Trump this go round, because it was about, I think, 9% in 2016. Mm-hmm. And I think that number has gone up.
And what's interesting,
it may serve us to see if we can invite Dr. Tommy back for that particular dialogue, because he has been doing some studies on why black men behavioral patterns seems to lean more towards this voting Republican during this time and space. So it's definitely something that we've been seeing on the internet more and more, but it is one of these things almost uncomfortable to talk about. But something that I'll say, as far as I think maybe juice towards that meeting is that oftentimes we have this visceral reaction to anyone who votes Republican who happens to be black. Like we have this visceral reaction, like, oh my God, I can't believe you would do this. And it's just, at the end of the day, voting Democrat is exactly the same conundrum, in my opinion, is still voting for things that will do harm against you. And so to have like this lens of quote unquote morality or superiority because you vote for the secret racists as opposed to the open racists doesn't really do anything for our community. So
Adrian Lionel Champion just asked, would we allow people to join the conversation? Absolutely, Adrian. I mean, we're going to be opening up the conversation relatively soon to the whole world, and anyone who would like to be involved in the conversation can actually definitely be involved in the very near future, within minutes.
Absolutely. And also to let you know, we've also had previous live streams on the same platform where we've opened up to the public to join us and talk with us and speak for quite some time. So I don't know if that's in the cards tonight, but if it is, look for the link. It'll be in the comments.
Now, speaking of black men's reaction, and it's not just black men, but mostly black men, because that's who tends to dominate sports, but the NBA players, and I believe it started with a Wisconsin team. I don't really follow
the WNBA actually.
Well, you're right. Them sisters was on code way before. But they didn't actually walk off though. They didn't boycott. I believe it was the NBA that actually walked off and boycotted playing. Period. I believe. But the WNBA, they were the ones that were rocking the Black Lives Matter T-shirts and showing solidarity that way. But to my point, though, it has caused a sort of domino effect where you see now this sister who's a tennis player, she has like a Japanese last name, and I think she may be part Japanese or something. Mm-hmm. She has refused to play within her tournament. We've had one brother who's an announcer or who's a commentator. He walked off, and I heard Charles Barkley didn't budge. He was sitting up there looking crazy when the brother walked off. But we're seeing a watershed of particularly athletes that are coming out and saying, this is not the time to be playing no games, literally, because that's what they do. They play games for a living. So they're saying now is not the time for games. We want justice.
Maybe it's my age again, but I'm like, okay. Without me being too verbose, I'll just say I think this is another bizarro COVID era phenomena, because what's happening now has been happening. We've had babies like Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin and others murdered, and what's his name?
Colin Kaepernick.
The brother that Philil Castile, something Castile.
Orlando Castile.
I always mess up his name. Who was murdered in cold blood on live stream. We could watch it. I mean, that's pretty horrible. Why now is what I'm saying. And others might say, well, okay, it doesn't matter why now. At least they're doing something. No, well, let me not say no. What would be powerful is if LeBron James said, I ain't playing no more until policy is in place on a national basis where it becomes illegal for a cop to kill somebody black. Where if you kill somebody unarmed, you lose your pension, you lose everything, and you wind up broken, homeless. And that's the threat in front of you if you murder somebody black who is not guilty of anything or who's unarmed. Period. Then I'll be impressed.
I think that's what it takes to impress. But I think that requires a level of clarity and political maturity that most black people don't have, despite how much money they have in the bank and what their level of fame and notoriety, is. Particularly, what's his name? LeBron James. And I give the brother credit for his heart being in the right place. Like, if that phrase means anything these days. But his actions with his school alone shows me that he doesn't have a lot of political maturity or strategy within him. He shelled out money to start a school that's basically still ran by the white public school system. So I mean, it's like I say, the brother's heart, I guess, is in the right place, but
I want his ass in the right place too, not just his heart.
But I think with that, I mean, like we've talked about it a couple of times, but when it comes to black individuals who are put on a pedestal, like they are put there, like by institutions and white media. So it's like to expect them to do something black after they have been groomed for their particular positions is self-disappointment, is making yourself angry at the end of the day. What I see about this particular moment is, if we are strategic enough as individuals on the ground, this is a moment for us to really talk to our children, because our children don't get the full grasp of what's going on. But if they do see their favorite athletes taking a step back, even if it's not in the ideal way, the best light, but the children see the athletes taking a step back, that can instill a sense of courage, in my opinion, a sense of affirmation and wanting to replicate and do better by these particular standards. So that's what I look at it for, but that does require us to do that particular collective work, and that's not on LeBron at this point.
We just need to learn the value of having a critical analysis and coming out of the white supremacy trauma trance that keeps us, like a well-meaning LeBron, only progressive to a certain level that is not enough to transform things and to defend black people from injustice. We need people to be able to be awake enough to demand that, and to be awake enough to be upset enough to stop sports when Tamir was murdered. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just frustrated by all of this, because it means nothing, and it has meant nothing at the end of the day, because they still doing what they're doing. But black people need to understand the importance of having a critical analysis and learning how to decode some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about when we get to our media discussion, because it's these kind of messages that's in this media stuff that has festered as a part of the media landscape since before you were born, and even before I was born, that we have never, like I said on Rolling Show years ago, the next frontier that black people need to address to finally get to a place of transformation and power and sane behavior on a national level is deconstructing the press. Because the press is one of the biggest culprits of perpetuating the paralysis that comes from the white supremacy trauma trance among black folks.
Well, speaking of critical analysis, there was also the DNC, Democratic National Convention, and the RNC, Republican National Convention, over the past week or so. But before we get into that, even on a world scale, we had some things happen to black people around the world that has been interesting and noteworthy. One is the president of Mali was just overthrown by the people. Now, if you're wondering what stance to have on this, he was overthrown by the people. You know, that if you look into it and see, you know, what happened, this man, the whole country agrees that he needs to step down. But guess who doesn't agree with him stepping down? Guess who feels like he should still be in power? France, West, all the colonizers of the world. They are, you know, and they've gotten the African Union, you know, to take this stance as well, which is a pro-dictatorship stance. You know, you always have so-called the West or these white countries talking about promoting democracy. If you listen to the DNC as well as the RNC, democracy is something they supposedly hold dear. But when countries like Togo, when countries like Mali, these West African and just African countries, period, demand democracy for themselves and demand that these puppet neo-colonial rulers step down, that's when, you know, all of a sudden they are, you know, they are to be condemned and they are going against, you know, whatever. But
we believe in democracy, but not that way. We want to make the decisions for you. We want to vote for you. That's what we want to do.
Basically,
we believe in white-controlled democracy.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of democracy, one of the countries that people actually credit with creating democracy, Greece, which we know they stole it from Egypt, from Kemet. But one of the places that was credited with, you know, founding democracy was recently condemned by the world for taking over 1,000 immigrants, mostly African, and abandoning them at sea, taking them to the edge of Greece's international waters, where the waters border with Turkey, I believe, and they left them there on a inflatable life raft with no motor and no paddle, no oars. One of the life rafts turned over, and people were stranded in the middle of the ocean. Many of them drowned. And the number of how many, well, they know that it's been over 1,000, but the real number is we don't know. And so that is something that's real big that happened. Whereas, you know, you have a so-called civilized country, a so-called democratic country, a country that's supposed to be a member of the UN and supposedly, you know, adheres to human rights and respects the value of human life. For them to do such a thing, it just shows, you know, the hypocrisy of it.
See, when y'all become old like me, y'all gonna understand what it feels like to have gone through this much lifetime and hear about horrific tragedies that happen to Africans around the world. It's just very painful. I'm not paralyzed. I want everybody to understand I'm not paralyzed, but my hard drive is full. My organic hard drive is full of data, including this kind of data of Black people being left to die, and Black people on a local and diasporic level being or thinking we're ill-equipped to intervene on the killing of us. We're not ill-equipped at all. We're ill-advised and misdirected. We have the equipment to do anything we want to do, but we don't have the consciousness right now. And it's just painful to know that those people, these are human beings. When you hear about Africans being led to the shores of Greece to die, those people are made up of the same DNA as us. They literally look like they literally look like us. They're just as human and desirous of joy and love and interaction and well-being and everything. They're just like us. They're human beings. This is horrible. I don't mean to be a Dante Downer, but you know, it's just horrible, and I don't think it's something that we should keep on allowing. But that's just my perspective.
We're coming up towards the end of the first half hour mark. If you two are in mind, I think we should roll clip. So Adam, yeah, I see the agreement. Adam, if you could roll clip, we're going to transition into our topic for the evening, which is decoding the media and really understanding what's going on here with a couple of TV shows, popular TV shows that people are watching.
Is back. Getting reacquainted with old friends.
Uncle George, the reason I'm back home, my father, It's gone missing.
Come on. Tonight, we gon' stack that Skrilla. My girls got bills.
Hey, girl, do you mind if I sit?
You don't mind.
Hey, girl. Hey.
Hi, Mom.
It's not nice for a young girl to give up.
Hi, Mom.
These are the best years of your life.
Hi, Mom.
I can't wait to see The Weeknd. I wish I had the ability to stream it.
It's giving me Insecure vibes just from that trailer alone. I was able to check out Lovecraft Country and a little bit of P-Valley. But I'm just like you, I'm in the same boat, having to check out The Weeknd.
Well, that's really too bad, y'all. I don't mean that in an obnoxious way. That's the best film out of all these films. It's the least degrading and toxic out of all these films. So y'all might want to, do what y'all can. Maybe this weekend, to check out The Weeknd, because it's relatively speaking, it's a really good film. Again, relatively speaking.
I gotta watch the third episode of Lovecraft this weekend.
Oh yeah, well. Anyway, so why don't y'all get started with these films? I just got finished watching some of P-Valley.
Oh.
Yeah. So I gotta be honest, I did not stick with P-Valley. It's not my cup of tea.
Wait,
like at all. But
wait, dude, you know about the reaction videos that be on YouTube, right?
Well, yeah, but I haven't seen
it. They watch something and you see their face as it reacts to it. I wish we could have seen Cleo's face while he was reacting to P-Valley.
It should be Pathetic Valley. That's what that piece should stand for. Roger, I know you're not that religious, but you should feel blessed. I'm talking about Roger, because Roger said, I think he said he hasn't seen any of these.
Yeah.
Except for Weeknd. I think you'd appreciate Weeknd, Roger. Anyway, before I run my mouth, I want to hear from you, Kashama, or whoever else has got something to say.
I think P-Valley is entertaining, actually. And the only reason I can find it entertaining is because I can do this thing where I call it suspension of disbelief. So I call it a little bit of suspension of sanity for a little bit and get into the soap opera-esque nature of the show. I wouldn't put this in the category of being a show that we can call a good affirming representation of Black people, though. It's a show about people who are desperate and people who have been marginalized into a certain life to survive. For those who haven't watched the show, it takes place in Chucalissa, Mississippi, which is supposed to be this small hick Mississippi town that's extremely corrupt, and it shows a lot of what they try to make as nuances according to Southern culture or life in the South. But I think some of it can be a bit contrived for entertainment purposes. One thing that I do appreciate is that I haven't seen a white savior in that show. The Black people are quite down and out, true. And there's a lot of corruption going on and dysfunctional interactions. The N-word is thrown around. They even call it Mexicans the N-word on that show. So that's thrown around like crazy. But ain't no white people coming to save them. That's one thing I can give them, which is what I don't see on a lot of shows like The Chi, which a lot of people tend to like and think is the bee's knees. But that show, I think, is more dangerous than P-Valley.
Well, what concerns me, and what always concerns me, is how these shows impact the Black psyche. I don't watch these shows because of how it's going to impact me, because I'm so analytical that I decode it from beginning to end, and the implications about Black people don't faze me. But a lot of us are trained to simply see it as entertainment. and it's full of implications given the lack of diversity and nuance in terms of how Black people are portrayed in the media. We have another show that's on TV in a context where there's a drought in positive Black representation about hoes and pimps and the N-word all over the place. And I don't think it's a coincidence that I only saw the first half hour of P-Valley. I haven't seen the rest of it. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that the beginning of it looks like an interracial Black woman is a central character. And there's also an interracial Black woman who's a central character in Lovecraft. And I don't think those are coincidences. I think that imagery re-impacts Black people in terms of standards of beauty and all kinds of other stuff that's occurring in the Black psyche that creates anti-white toxicity. But Starz keeps on creating shows like Power and all these kind of shows, which keep on showing Black people in these very, very degrading contexts. What I saw about P-Valley or Pussy Valley was very, very degrading. Let alone misogynist, let alone anti-Black. But there's no white savior. Well, you don't need a white savior when what you get is what white people allow you to have. Because the R and Starz, those it ain't white folks making these decisions. And one of the things that's often said, I hear Black people, as I'm sure somebody's thinking this right now, well, Black people do their own thing. Well, Black people are doing their own thing, but their thing is not greenlit for mainstream media context. And Dante Ross is saying the white savior is coming. They probably are coming, but they don't have to come next week when our choices for Black entertainment and drama are so toxic. They make those choices, so they're already there. Whether they're portrayed as a savior or not, they're the architects of what we get to see and what we don't get to see.
I think that's the biggest problem, Cleo, is the fact that one, it is controlled, mostly by whites, and two, is that there's just simply no balance of narratives when it comes to Black people. Like I said, I can watch it because I can do this thing of suspending certain things, which most people can't do. Like you said, Cleo, that's what concerns you,
particularly children
like this.
Children who probably watch it.
And now that I don't think children should be watching it at all. And what's interesting is there's a show that I've seen a couple episodes of called Harlots, right? And it's about it. Yeah, I know y'all haven't seen it. It takes place in London, in Victorian era London, and it's about these white British prostitutes in Victorian age London. And this show is full of debauchery, right? But the thing is, there's a balanced narrative when it comes to white life.
That's
and
right.
White love and white interactions and white sex and white, economics and what have you. So, I mean, every society, now I wouldn't say every society, but many societies that get to a certain level of population or whatever, you're going to have a certain underbelly of certain characters and certain lifestyles. But the problem that we see with Black images is that that's what dominates. And I think that's the most problematic thing about it. Even down to the introduction, I always have to skip the intro because it's a little boy or a little girl or something singing down in the valley when the girls get naked. And I'm thinking like, wait, who? And is this really a little child, or did they digitize his voice to sound childish like this? And that's a trend that I've seen in shows like The Wire and what have you, whereas Black children are criminalized and put into some very adult positions and roles more than any other groups, what I noticed.
But to make a point, I'm going to bring up another HBO show that was very, 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 very popular. Matter of fact, it was rated to date as the most popular show that ever made television. And I know a lot of Black people who are obsessed with this show too, because I saw some of their YouTubes, a lot of young people, and I was Game of Thrones. And for people who want to understand media literacy, I'm going to give you a real short media literacy lesson on how white supremacy works and how you could be sitting there applauding and all involved and loving every minute of something that's really degrading to you. For example, Game of Thrones only featured one black woman, similar to P-Valley and Lovecraft. It was also a biracial black woman. The 3 black men that were featured in the film, 2 of them were pimps, like characters, who had nothing to do with other black people, who were always in the bed with other white women, exclusively. And then the one, check it out in terms of how the white supremacy methodology and strategy works on the black psyche. The one black man in the show who was liking a black woman, it had no dig. I could have been more professional, and more scientific and said he was without unit. But I'm saying
he was without peen.
Yeah, I'm saying it the way I'm saying it on purpose because that's how people actually think. Most people do not call dicks penises. But the one brother who was loving somebody else black had no penis and could not make love to her. And of course, she winds up getting her head chopped off. But black people couldn't, like the rest of the world, was breaking their necks, running red lights and knocking over street signs the night that came on to watch Game of Racist Thrones. And I'm just reiterating, so while you thinking back on those who are listening, one black man was a pirate who wound up in a sauna with a bunch of white women. The other one was chasing the queen with the dragons, who was a white woman and was in bed with white women on the way to that white woman, other white women. No black people was loving on each other as a part of a norm, particularly black men loving black people or even around engaging black women or black people. And as I mentioned, just being redundant to make my point, the one brother who was loving a sister of sorts couldn't do nothing with her but look at her because he had no penis.
So
now, this is the psyche, believe it or not. Go on, dude. Sorry.
No. So I have a friend who he has two analyses of this particular show. So one, he's a big fan of Game of Thrones, right? And when I had asked him about black characters in the show, he said that he was ecstatic that there was little to no black people in this show because it was so violent and white people were messing each other up every episode and there was all this incest going on. He was just like, I ain't want to see black people in this particular light. But interesting enough, when we would do a workshop together, sometimes we would do a workshop on representation, particularly as St. John 11 Brothers, and how the lack of representation for black men with black men in that particular industry, with that lack of representation, shows like Game of Thrones become even more problematic. And what we was explaining to the audience was that we're trying to watch a show about Dungeons and Dragons and magic, but we can't go an episode without seeing Becky getting laid out and having a real good time with her brother-in-law or whoever else during the show. And it's that these reinforced narratives of white intimacy and white people having intimacy with each other in the midst of, as you say, the drought of black people showing intimacy and romance with each other. This is when you start to see the impact of how media does not make space for individuals that look like ourselves, no matter how we show up in the sexuality argument. It's just that you're trying to watch anything that has nothing to do with white intimacy, and you're going to see them making love to each other.
Loving each other. Boothie Latham said, confession, I watched it. Well, I watched it too, for analytical purposes and for research purposes, of course. And it's not true that there were no black people in it. Black people had memorable roles in it, but they were very, very degrading roles, so people wanted to forget. But there was another point I wanted to make that I think I've lost, and I might have to come back to it. But I'll just reiterate the fact that the media, oh yeah, I remember now. What was interesting, I went to Haiti earlier this year. How many of you brothers ever heard of the Citadel?
In Haiti or the Citadel in Europe? The
Citadel in Haiti. I mentioned Haiti, so obviously I'm talking about Haiti. Okay, well, and I didn't know I was going to be discussing this, and maybe while we're talking, Adam will find, if he goes online and write Haiti Citadel images, you'll be able to see the Citadel. what's interesting about Game of Thrones is that, it shows white folks and all of this opulence and power and castles. Well, the Citadel, which I'll say for another show in terms of going into detail, is really a building like those buildings in for real that actually exist, with the same level of majesty, etc., built by Africans in Haiti, called the Citadel. If you can find an image of it, Adam, please bring it up for us so people can see that this exists. I took pictures of it and I was there, and it has the gravitas, the size, the grandiosity, the opulence, everything. There it is. That's the Citadel. And that picture is so far away, you can't see the size of it, but it's massive and it's huge, and it's full of cannons and all that stuff that we saw in more. No dragons, of course, but it has a lot of the imagery that we saw in Game of Thrones, and Black people actually built it from the ground up. Black people who practiced voodoo, who were resisting Christianity, which is a whole nother voodoo. I'm sorry, I should say this. Because of white supremacy mythology, voodoo has a bad reputation, but it's not bad. It's another one of white people's lies that they tell on Black people so we can be turned off against ourselves. But anyway, we don't know about the Citadel. So when we watch Game of Thrones, we were like, oh God, white people just got it so going on. They have such majesty. They have Black people build stuff just like that, and we know nothing about it, and that's on purpose.
Well, the big mistake that a lot of us do when we watch shows like that, because I watched it, just so you know, Boosie Latham, and I didn't just watch it for research purposes, like Cleo said, but I watched it because I was entertained by it, but one thing I did not do, like I saw a lot of Black people doing, was I realized that a lot of this is coming out of white people's psyche, these stories and stuff, and I'm not going to internalize these characters and relate to these characters. I saw Black women who were talking about they was Team Queen. What was the queen name?
So
not the one with the dragons.
Cersei.
Yeah, they were talking about their Queen Cersei, and I'm like, wait, you're Black.
If you got to pick a side.
Yeah, but how can any Black person really relate to a Cersei? Come on now. And even when Danny, and I know I got caught up in the whole dragon things, like, yeah, free them slaves, break them chains, right? Mother of the chain breakers, right? And so, but then when she started cutting up, that didn't mess me up. I was just like, oh, look, she's showing her true colors. Oh, look, it finally comes out. She couldn't get away. Now she destroying everything. So, but a lot of Black people were watching this show and they were messed up in the head, because they were internalizing these characters and the plots that were taking place. And we got to realize that we got to view some of this stuff as a true outsider and keep a critical analysis with it. You can, but you can't get to that place until you can start decoding stuff. Until then, you're just going to be sucking this stuff in and soaking it in like a sponge, and you won't have no idea. I'm at a place to where I can stomach certain things and I can watch certain things and actually get entertained by it and actually get some lessons out of it, because I know what I'm decoding and I know what I'm looking at, and I'm not internalizing certain things. But
our job at some point, and hopefully a little bit of that will occur in today's show, is to teach our community to do what you're talking about that you do, Kashama, is to watch this stuff and look at it for what it is. And even when you get passionate for the dragon or whoever the hell you do, that you put it in its mythical context.
Break them chains
for what it is, and don't have a heartbreak when somebody dies that don't even care about you, that don't even exist, because we really are trained to just be worried about white folks and what's going to happen next. But somebody asked about Greenleaf, and what I should let you know is that we're going to be talking about Black faces and media spaces as a normal part of the Melanated Solution show. So we're going to get to Greenleaf. I definitely have some perspective on Greenleaf, but I don't want to get into it today because we don't have time, and it was not on the agenda. But we should put it on the agenda. But somebody just wrote that they sad that it's gone, and Dante said, "Break them chains." Well, yeah,
break them chains.
But yeah, isn't Greenleaf Greenleaf? There's one that's around the church, and there's one.
Yeah, that's Greenleaf. That's Greenleaf.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a very interesting show that we should talk about at some point. But on to Lovecraft though.
All right.
I know I have a lot of thoughts on Lovecraft. I have a lot of different. So one, I want to say that as just a show to watch as entertainment without decoding, I'm enjoying. But there's definitely some moments, especially for me, that popped up in this second episode because I had watched it today, so that way I knew I could be refreshed and not forget anything. There's a couple of moments where I was just like, white people really think they're slick. And so what I will point out is if anyone, spoilers alert, episode 2 of Lovecraft Country, there's a moment when a prominent white character offers a ring to the main character, Tick. And she expresses her sadness and how she could never get this particular ring, no matter how much she tried. And Tick responds saying that, and I get it just because I'm a man. And like, there's supposed to be this moment of recognizing how patriarchy supposedly triumphs and trumps racism. And mind you, right after this particular moment happens, he's wearing the ring and is being caused much pain. Like, this ring does nothing for him in the first place, mind you. But he's being caused much pain. And the story for this is interesting to me because there seems to be this push in media as well as in real life to paint white women as this docile, innocent creature that has played no part in the collective oppression of Black folks. Now, mind you, there is a white woman in the show in the same episode who is harmful to white folks, as harmful to Black folks is very clear. But this particular woman is painted as like a damsel in distress. She's got all the hair and the Goldilocks. Like, the moment you see her from the first moment, it's like, pay attention to this woman, please. And they do this narrative in a reality in which, if you even look at current economics right now, white women trump Black men when it comes to getting money. If you look at the history and the records of who was most likely to kill or abuse someone and literally beat them to death during slave times, it was white women. Like, this is in the laws, like that it was white women who most likely were the ones during slave times to beat someone to death. In addition to that, about lying about rape in order to cause the castration or hanging of another Black man. Like, white women have played an integral part in violence and oppression. When we look at the white boy who terrorized and killed people in Kenosha just this week, it was his mother who went to go drop him off. And so I'm looking at this particular episode where it's like, and I get the ring just because I'm a man. I'm like, what does that say? What are you trying to say about faith? What? Mm-hmm. It don't work. It's not working over here.
I'm so glad you saw that, Duke, because I saw the exact same thing. And I was taking notes on it. When I took my notes, I said the ideas of feminism and so-called Black male privilege are entertained as the lead character explains to a white female his position within the secret society by virtue of being born a man, and she can't get it, even though he's a Black man.
And so mind you, the power she wanted to get was to be oppressive. like the power she wanted to get was to be oppressive.
Well, I make predictions all the time, and they often are accurate. I knew for some reason, I didn't know how they were going to do it, but I knew for some reason and somehow the lead young brother character was going to be naked. I knew it. I said, so this boy gonna have his clothes off and be naked, just like the brother in what was the other show about spaceships and stuff that was centered around the murders in Black Wall Street. What was that?
I forget it.
That's like
whatever. But that brother wound up butt naked with his stuff all up in the camera. And I'm like,
you're talking about Watchmen. That's what we're talking about.
Watchmen, yes. And I said to myself, this brother, he's an exquisitely attractive brother. And I said, okay, he gonna be naked. These white folks gonna have him naked for some reason. And there he was, with nothing on but a smile. So I'm just saying, I just predicted I was going to.
He wasn't smiling in that scene. I remember it vividly. He was quite.
Well, no, he wasn't
quite
smiling.
despondent.
It's a figure of speech. He didn't have nothing on.
But also he was being touched.
He was being bathed by white folks, which is interesting when we consider the history.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that wasn't no bath. They were just groping that man. They just had water.
And similar in that other show, whatever it was called that you just mentioned, dude, when the brother was naked, he was not with nobody black in his presence either. He was on display, and that bothers me. That's objectifying to me, and feeds into the narrative of black male disposability and objectification.
We're not trained to recognize black males as victims, especially along the lines of sexual victimization, sexual predatory, because if it was a black woman, like, we would immediately draw references to like Sarah Bartman or any of the numerous particular images throughout history. But the idea of a naked black male, it is just a casualty. We're either going to sexualize it ourselves or just treat it as part of the media landscape as a episode, and that's it.
One thing that that can be refreshing, because I noticed I loved it, is initially in the first episode they showed a very loving relationship between the uncle and his wife. I believe the wife is being played by Anjanou Ellis. Yeah, and the uncle is.
I'm never going to forget that name.
I call him Angela Bassett's husband. What's that brother's name? He's a great actor in his own right, and I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not. And I've interviewed him before, and his name escapes me right now.
And I know his name. He's a like I say, he's a great actor in his own right, and he shouldn't just be relegated to being Angela Bassett's husband. But that's still a good title anyway, being Angela's husband. I mean,
Courtney Vance,
great actor. Yeah, that's his name, Vance.
From Shamina Rawls. Thank you.
Courtney B. Vance is his name. And he typically plays roles that are well-rounded and affirming to black men. Whether they are, he's not always playing a hero, but he plays a role that we can look at and not feel degraded. And him and Anjanou Ellis tend to do a good job at that together.
Yeah, he's an excellent actor, and he loves some black folks, and he is a talented man. And I interviewed him when he played "If the Glove Don't, if it don't fit, you must have quit." What's the brother's name? The attorney?
Johnny Cochran.
Yeah, he played Johnny Cochran. I interviewed him on Roland Show when he did that, and that was exciting for me because I'm really a fan of this brother's talent. But one film I want to talk about later, but don't y'all let me forget, is the Django. Okay. The reason I want to talk about Django is because I want to again show folks very blatantly, so we can learn how to decode white supremacy intentionality, and that's wrapped up in a so-called pro-black package, and how they pull us in and get us, including the film that starred the large sister, the young large sister, that she was in, and people teasing about chasing some chicken. What's her name?
Precious,
yes. I want to deconstruct Precious, which was very fictitious in terms of who it made the heroes out of. All the heroes, we're not going to get into it today, but the audience, I'm putting it out there for you to think about. The heroes and Precious all had something in common that was not part of the narrative of the book, but that Lee Daniels did himself. And Django did some very powerful anti-black implications as well that a lot of people didn't catch. And the bottom line is this, black folks: if you don't catch the implications, you internalize them, and they do the damage that they were intended to do, which is why we're going to talk about decoding on one show soon.
Well, before we bring anyone on, before you I guess go any further, I wanted to include this quote by a sister that we know there in the Baltimore area. She works as I believe a substance abuse counselor, among as being an advocate in the community in other ways. Shalise Green Thompson. I wanted her to come on and speak about Lovecraft Country, but she went ahead and gave me this interesting quote. She said, "I love Lovecraft Country." Oh, here it is. It says, "I think it's a very interesting study of the Jim Crow South, especially the comparison between Uncle and Tick." Now she goes on to say that Tick is an excellent example of the generation who fought back violently against the system. His anger at the system is uncontrollable and refreshing.
Mm-hmm. And she also says the uncle has learned to navigate systems of white supremacy. Even his chosen occupation is about teaching others how to navigate around white supremacy.
Now she's talking about physically navigate because he writes this green book type of publication.
Mm-hmm. I think it's definitely an interesting concept for the period piece talking about the uncle. But I struggle with saying that he has learned how to navigate systems of white supremacy. I think that he has learned how to be docile. I think he's learned how to adapt. I think he's learned how to not be problematic around white folks. And that may be semantics, but I really do feel like it's important for us to point out that this is not someone that you go to when you're trying to resist, when you're trying to fight back against your oppressor, because they have accepted, as far as I'm concerned, a particular role of not pushing back or not, quote unquote, bucking back against the system. It was a poet, Sonia Sanchez, who said, I wanted to say this earlier, she talks about the time when Star Wars came out and how big Star Wars, the very first film, how amazing everyone loved that particular movie and how, the sound effects and sci-fi, blah, blah, blah. It was all about the future and how all the Black friends that she had were saying how much they loved this. And Sonia said, I am not interested in this movie. And her friends would ask her why. She said, I get upset whenever white people imagine the future and I'm not in it. And so that was her first particular thought. And when I think about that, I'm reversing that thought process a little bit now. And I think about these TV shows and movies that do period pieces on the past. And when you see the past and we're not in it, unless we are service to white folks or in conjunction or congruence with white folks, again, what is that saying about us? Because every time Black people show up in the past, it's either a slave film or we're quote unquote buddy with white folks, not in our own cities, not in building our own institutions, none of that. Every time it's about building in community with white folks or being in service to them, one or the other. There's no outside concept. And so I think that's something else that we should really focus on as a community when we're absorbing these messages. Lastly, and I'll open this up for everyone here, is that this thing about sundown towns that had a lot of people talking, recognizing that it was indeed a thing. I think when I first heard about it, I was like, here we go again. It was like Michelle Obama said that the White House was built by slaves again. Everyone is just like, oh, white people were that terrible? It's like, yes, white people were this horrible and still are. But every time we act like it's a surprise.
And that's what that's why I call it the white supremacy trauma trance. I don't know if any of you drive. I drive a lot. And I don't know if you've ever been asleep before at the wheel and then woke up and you were driving and then you fell asleep again. And when you fall asleep, you forget that you're driving. And when you wake up, you're surprised that you're driving again because you're that tired. And that's the trance state that Black people are in. When white people do some horrible, horrendous, just medieval, sick stuff, we go back into a trance. They get re-surprised again when they do it again. Then we go back into the white supremacy trauma trance. They get re-surprised, which keeps us at risk for being killed over and over again because we don't stay awake enough to successfully resist what they're doing and teaching Black people to stay awake so we all can be in collective resistance to what they do. But we wind up being vulnerable to the trance state by not knowing how to critique and decode the biggest poisonous system in our midst, and that's the media, which is why we're here. Somebody just mentioned Queen and Slim. Another film full of white supremacy trapdoors that looks like a Black celebration story. But anyway, y'all, being that it's 8:05, we probably should more openly open up our conversation to the rest of the world and invite people to join us either by video or by voice, whatever they choose. But Adam has put the link on our page. He can put it back up there again since that was a while ago, so you can all see. But people asked if they could join our conversation, and yes, we strongly urge you to. And also, since Adam is putting up the YouTube version of the show, we want to be able to have this show self-support itself, which will be helpful if we're able to get to the point of being able to monetize the show. So we're inviting you who are watching on Facebook to also go over to what's it called, YouTube, and watch it, because if we get enough watchers there, we can monetize this show, and it helps to finance its perpetuation, which we could definitely benefit from. But Roger, you just asked a question. You want to come on the air and ask it? You said it was off topic, but I'm sure you could find a way to nuance it into making it relevant to the discussion, because clearly you find a connection because you're asking about.
And I actually think it's very on topic. I don't see a problem.
So can you come on? You've been on before. Everybody's seen your handsome face, so don't be shy. And Adrian, I just read announcing Adrian. He asked if he could be on the show. Yes, come on. And sisters, we love when you come onto the show. We love bringing some more gender equity to what we're doing. So come on, Tomina in Livonia, Michigan, if you want to come on the air and let us know what's up with your perspective. Angel.
Our YouTube should be Melanated Media Solutions. In addition to that, another reason why we are urging, if you will, for you all to watch on YouTube is because we do know that Facebook has its issues, and there's no telling how long this platform will be serviceable to us. So please follow all of our links just in case.
Okay, well, since Roger's being shy, let's put up what he said, Adam, on the I know this is kind of off topic, but what do y'all think about this ADOS and FBA notion that only African Americans play African American roles as opposed to Black Brits or West African born Blacks? It's very relevant. But
so I know that ADOS stands for African Descendants of Slaves, but I'm not familiar with the FBA term. If someone could let me know. But what I will say is
it stands for American Descendants of Slaves, ADOS, and FBA stands for Foundation of Black Americans.
Foundation of Black Americans. Okay, that's new for me. Thank you. Far as the media choosing Brits to do this particular role, I do think it's I don't think it's an issue far as Brits playing these particular roles, but I do think it's an issue when we only choose Brits, Black Britons, to do these roles. I think it's very interesting that when we are looking at pivotal leaders from the U.S. who have dealt with U.S. colonialism, when we look at the images and people who are doing these roles, they are not people who have that authentic narrative. They are not individuals who have been through this particular process, who cannot draw on inspiration from this process. These are individuals who have a very, we got to remember, Britain is also colonized, and so is many other parts of Africa. So even our African brothers and sisters who happen to come from those places and play our roles, they all have this romanticized view of America that is not true to the authentic experience that we know about. And so I think that is the issue. That's what I have a critique of, because often when these particular people are outside of character, they have a very different analysis, or lack thereof, of racism compared to American-bred citizens, if you will. But thoughts?
Well, let's be clear. What's the brother's name from Britain who played?
I think it's Daniel Kaluuya. That's just what I was saying off ref. I don't remember if that's it. Daniel.
The brother, the Brit who played Martin Luther King and Selma, the sister who played Queen and Slim, and the brother who played Slim. What do these three Brits have in common?
They're all dark skinned.
And what about their partner?
Or white.
All three of them have white partners. There's no such thing, y'all. And hi, Adrian. We want to hear from you in a moment. We have to break this analysis down real quick. Good to see you. We see you too, Dante. You're waiting in the black room. We're gonna get to you, but please bring your face up on the screen because we don't want to just show a white wall or a pink wall, which is what we see as we see your name, Dante. Anyway, it's significant and intentional when black people who don't have the African enslavement history are being the ones who are chosen to be in these roles, including people like Joy Reid, who I think is cool. She doesn't have a classic African American background, including everybody who's called black, who's running for vice president and have been president. These people do not come from dual black parentage, nor do they have a direct blood root to the enslavement of Africans in the United States. Those kind of people have a whole different energy toward white people, and white people have a different energy toward them because they feel less anxious, less guilty, less threatened when they're around so-called black people or Africans who their foremothers and fathers didn't lynch. So there's a whole nother white accommodationist energy that they expect from black people born from someplace else, and a whole nother, like I said, less anxiety that they feel and less concern about racism being brought up against them when they bring in imports. And I don't say imports in a negative way. I have no problem with Africans and Caribbeans and everybody else because this country who are Africans. I love Africans, period. I'm being contextual when I say imports because white people, I remember when I was in San Francisco, I was involved with a liberal organization that was white-led. I was a child then. I was an undergrad. That had a whole lot of black people in the organization, but all of them were from Africa. And all of them treated the white people differently or saw them differently from me because they didn't look at these white folks as people that had enslaved their forefathers. And matter of fact, because their life experience was from another continent, they forgot they had been colonized because they were around nothing but Africans, even though the attorneys wore white, looked like RuPaul wearing white wigs, and the judges all had white wigs on. They didn't have no analysis of that. I'm talking over in Africa, but everybody was black. Anyway, there's some dynamics around all these people who are black from other places getting these roles that are intentional on behalf of white people that accommodates white folks. And they all happen to have white partners too. That's not a coincidence either. So Adrian, what you got for us? And we see you, Dante. We get you in a moment when you finish drinking over there. But what's up, Adrian?
Good evening, everybody. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Hello.
Good evening, brother.
Doing all right. Now I'm really kind of enjoying the conversation, and I think I was asking, will you include other people, because as I've been watching your lives, sometimes it almost seems that you're having the conversation amongst yourselves. So that's why I was asking, will you allow other people to engage and be a part of the discussion, as opposed to just watching you guys have a discussion?
Well, apparently you have been coming into our shows like after they started or at a certain point, because we've had guest people such as yourself and Roger and others on every single show, and we've opened up every single show to the community. So,
well, probably the ones I've been on, it was the ones I've watched. It was just your already selected panel. So I did not see a lot of the other ones prior to this one, to me asking the question.
So what's up? What do you want to share?
Well, like I said, I'm just enjoying the conversation. I guess getting back to the British black actors, getting roles to play Americans. Sometimes I think that's they're not giving people that already live here, that are black, that are American, the roles that they can play the part and be authentic, as opposed to seeking talent outside of the U.S. And it's cutting. It's like cutting your well, what's the saying I'm looking for? Cutting your nose to spite your face, so to speak, if that makes sense. When you have all this talent here in the United States and in Hollywood, why do you have to seek outside sources to play a role when you can just audition Black actors who've been in the business quite some time here? Charity starts at home, but we tend to see, and not disrespecting any of the British actors. They do what they do, and they're great at their craft. However, we have people here who do what they do, and they're great at their craft.
Well, as I just mentioned, whatever happens in media, for example, the CIA being saviors to the people of Wakanda, even though the CIA helped to murder and set up a situation that led to the death of King and the Black Panthers being destroyed. The CIA was involved in all that. When they made a film called The Black Panther, the CIA was rescuing Black folks. So my point in bringing that to your attention is that, and this is one of the reasons why we're going to be doing this Black Faces in Media Spaces part of our show, is that everything that we see, you asked why, and you said charity starts at home. Well, that passage implies that we live in a neutral society that cares about what you're talking about. But everything that's being done that winds up becoming topical or part of the media is based on white interest. I mean, like, for example, what's that show Get Out was made by a brother who didn't get out. And it starred an English brother who didn't get out. They both was in. And what's diabolical about that film was that was a good film. That was a well-made film and has some interesting insights. But without me going into all the psychological stuff, the mind is both conscious and unconscious. And it's the unconscious that takes in the toxins of the implications of white supremacy mythology in these films that we don't analyze because we get wrapped up in what we think is a good wrapping of Black affirmation when it's really a trap of white supremacy, anti-Blackness in the unconscious. Because just imagine, for example, in the show Just Us or This Is It, what's that show called?
This Is
Just
Us.
imagine if This Is Us featured a Black man who wound up loving a Black woman who came from Black parents who were healthy, successful, loved him, nurtured him, and brought him into being. In fact, according to the show, white people made him. He was saved from some messed up Black folks, one who had HIV, one who died of an overdose, and saved by white folks, became his wonderful husband to this Black woman. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Well, the conscious mind is all excited about the residual love story between the Black man and Black woman. The unconscious is going, damn, he was made by white folks. So I brought an example of how white supremacy works and giving people some examples of what to decode, because it's not about what you're saying, Adrian. I wish it was about, charity starting at home. No, white charity starts with whatever they construct. And it's about what they construct for themselves. It's not about us.
It's interesting you said that, Cleo. No, as far as I just think it's interesting you said that as in regards to that character on This Is Us, that white people made him. And I think that there's a similar narrative. And I'm not picking on Kamala or Harris or Obama or anyone else, but
it's relevant. It's relevant.
It's very relevant. They're placed in front of us as Black people, but yet Black people didn't create them. And we're telling ourselves that, my son and daughter are going to look up at these people and realize that they can be them, and no, they can't, because they're not being made by the same thing that made those people. So I'm glad you articulated it like that. I think Roger was about to say something. I saw your mouth moving, Roger.
Oh, hey, Dr. Williams, what's up?
Wait, what did you call me?
I called you Dr. Williams.
Oh, please. No, but can you hear me though?
Yes, we hear you. You just even your lamp in the back. We see the whole thing.
Oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to say though that I remember when going back to the issue what Adrian said about charity starting at home, which I'm sympathetic to that. As a Jamaican-born man, I totally understand that. But I remember when how Stella Got Her Groove Back was made into a film, and there were discussions in Jamaican circles at the time. Why couldn't they find a Jamaican man? Why couldn't they find a Jamaican actor? So it's interesting because that conversation, because I think it was Taye Diggs who played the character that was
another brother with white women, but go on.
Exactly. Which I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Taye Diggs is what Tariq Nasheed and what's her name, Carnell would call ADOS or FBA, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think he has any other type of black diasporic roots. I think he's African American, if I'm not mistaken. So I remember back in those days. I mean, I was a freshman in college at the time, maybe a little bit younger, and I remember those conversations going on about why couldn't they find a Jamaican actor to play that role when it was a Jamaican character in what's her name's book. The same thing with King of Scotland. They chose a Black American to play an African role. So, and there were conversations about that too. Why couldn't they find an African, continental African actor? And they are out there, so that actually speak English, but would have had the intonations with the accent and everything would be more authentic. But don't get me wrong. I think what's his name? His name slips me now. Who played King of Scotland? The main character. Well, this character. He did an excellent job. But I think it just goes to, and when those conversations are had, as Cleo was suggesting, and I think Duke brought it up as well, people are not seeing the puppet masters behind the scenes doing those things. So then it's another example of us blaming each other again. The continental Africans against the Black Americans, and the Caribbean, Afro-Caribbeans. And it's not us. It's the people who fund these films that are doing this. We don't have, Forrest Whitaker's trying to get paid. He's trying to pay his bills, like everybody else. He's going to take the role. He's not going to say, I think I'm going to turn this role down and let a continental Africa. I mean, nobody's going to do that. So it's the people who control the whole media entertainment system that's to blame, but we often don't see the puppet masters behind the scenes, and then we end up blaming each other. So I just wanted to say that.
Roger, I imagine that King of Scotland was full of fiction.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And that the
I
white
didn't know it at the time, but I found out after that a lot of it was.
Yeah, the white savior did not exist. That did not happen.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole lot of problems with the King of Scotland. We have a sister on here. I know Patrick was first, but we haven't had a sister yet.
We
so
actually had Dante first.
Oh, that's right, Dante.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Dante been here so long, I think he went and shaved and stuff since he's been on there. So let's let Dante speak, and then we'll have Tomaine come in, and then we'll have Patrick speak. Is that cool? All right, what's up, Dante? Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, so y'all can hear me, right? Yeah. So I don't have a problem with decoding. I can do that. But when you try to explain that, and it's like taking it from what we know and giving it to the people so they can understand, because I deal with this every day on a daily basis of trying to explain to these people, you need to be aware of what people are doing, and you need to have some type of consciousness or some insight so you'll be able to make the right type of judgment and think on your own 2 feet. The issue that for people to think like us and to be able to, and listen, I applaud you guys for this type of conversation, because I used to think that I was the only one around who thought like this. But anyway, getting it from me to them so they can understand it is the issue that I'm having on a daily basis. Because in both of the jobs that I do, I'm around a lot of my people, and to hear the things that they talk about and what they put before this, and then when I go to talking the way you guys are talking to them, I mean, they shut down immediately on me, and they think, and I'm isolated. I think it takes courage to think and act the way what we're doing here right now, especially as Black same gender loving people as well, because that is the issue that I'm having. Yeah, I can see, I can watch it, I can decode it. Not only just the movies and media and stuff, I'm talking about in everyday life, to the point that my own people would do some of them same things that you talk about, that we are so witnessing to, that's going on in the media. that they bring it out of their homes and bring it to the job and everything, and they treat you the same. They try to play them fucking. Oops, excuse me, I didn't mean to cuss. They try to play them fucking games, you know, and you're not up for it. And when you confront them on it, oh, you're isolated. You're the bad guy. You're the militant. In this community where I live, I'm the militant. Because I would tell them right off, and I would call them on stuff that they don't even realize that is going on. I'm talking about stuff that they're doing themselves that they're doing.
Right.
I try not to involve other people. I'm just talking about you and what you're doing and what I see that you're doing. Okay, not what they're doing.
I have a request, Dante, and hopefully you'll be able to honor this request. I think that we should have a show at some point on strategies to deal with Black people without a critical analysis.
There it is.
Ways to approach these issues in ways that don't shut folks down. Because it can be done. It's not necessarily 100%.
I believe it.
But it can be done. I mean, I've met people who were resistant and anti-Black who literally worked with me and for me, who's had transformations because of some strategies and techniques where they realized I was doing them or not. So there's ways, because all I'll say is this, because that's kind of another topic, but it's a very important topic, is that even the most confusing looking Black person has a pro-Black person inside of them fighting to get out. Because it's natural to love yourself and respect yourself. That's a natural thing. It's a natural to believe in self-preservation and to want your people to win. That's natural. But our nature has been interrupted by the media and a relentless campaign against our common sense. But it's under there. Now, unfortunately, sometimes temporary insanity is lifelong because people died before they got healed. You know, they never got a chance to not be crazy. But the madness that we are experiencing in terms of the anti-Blackness that's part of the Black psyche in the United States can be defeated. What would happen, what would be great is if we did something on a macro level that would turn on lights on a national basis, but that's difficult when you don't own your own satellite in the sky. But we can work with each other and talk with each other. So we have that show on strategies to teach Black folks to have a critical analysis and see things as they are. Please come on and let us and repeat that scenario or some examples of challenges you've had with trying to get what look like hard-headed folks to see the light. But one thing I will say, in case you run into somebody tomorrow or tonight, because we're everywhere, you know, anti-Black, confused Black folks, is that hostility doesn't work. Hostility doesn't work, and blatant judgment and what looks like condescension doesn't work. And that's a difficult dance, because just being a Black male who doesn't hate themselves will be considered condescending. Just because you sit in the room and not apologizing, you could be, you know, seen as condescending or uppity or arrogant because you're not being passive. So that's a dance. But we'll talk about that in more detail on a separate show. But I really appreciate what you're saying, because what you're saying is extremely real in this epidemic.
Cleo, I'm sorry. I know that two more people have to speak, but y'all know that people would pay for that, right?
Pay for what?
That precious information.
Wait, that I'm talking about? Oh yeah, people pay for it.
Yes.
And when we talk about it, we ain't gonna go into all the strategies. But yeah, we have a model called CTCA that's full of all kinds of strategies that we can use that can do trans-breaking work. And yes, we should get paid for it so we can stay around. Thank you for imposing that consideration. What's up,
I believe we have Sister Tamina and then Brother Patrick.
Yes. Hey, Tamina, what's happening?
I am wonderful. Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it. I'm honored to be on here as an African-American female. You know something? I'm not sure if I'm on topic because I was so busy listening. I'm still in the beepers cell phone with the, that looks like a book binder. So it took me a minute to try to connect. So I might be off topic, but one of my main concerns is about the conversation amongst the Black community in different aspects of life that we have experienced. As far as male versus female, male versus male, female versus male, I for one can be the first one to admit that I am totally ignorant of some issues that I have come across as of late, and it's not willful ignorance because I wasn't taught appropriately of how to handle certain things. Being in a Black family and in faith and middle class and everything, I see things now in my 53 years of age of the younger generation, although they're out here protesting and everything. But I really and truly hope that they understand what they're getting into, and that this movement we've seen before, the behaviors, the response, the output, we've seen this before. But we have to have some insight as far as us as a community, because we have lost that communication with one another. We're, like you said, Dr. Cleo, we're so lackadaisical when it comes to issues. But at the same time, when you become used to an idea or an ideology, or as I call it, familiarities, it's become a revolving circle. Now, I do a live, and I also have a side group, and I'm very provocative, to say the least. Dr. Cleo get on me a lot. But it seems like to me, if I say something provocative, if I say something out of class, you get the attention, you see. And I'm quite sure that we are all adults, but we also are highly intelligent enough that we can have and hold a conversation, especially in our community. The resources that we need to talk to one another as an equal is problematic, because the system has set us up for the families and one another's not, to talk to one another, not to even know one another, but get used to the fact that you are a number instead of a name. And that's my biggest issue. We have to get back to communicate with one another in every shape, form, or fashion. That's my passion. That is my passion.
Ooh. Well, sister, I share that passion, and I agree with you. And you up there bringing up another show again, like somebody else did, in terms of what that deserves in terms of response.
Well, okay, with the Lovecraft, and I was saying something about The Watchmen. The Watchmen was intriguing, to say the least. But what I find puzzling, I find perplexing, is that the very first episode, when they talked about the Tulsa, Oklahoma, there were so many people that did not know that had occurred. There were so many people, more so non-white, were saying, "Is this fiction? Is this for real?" And I'm like, "Oh, honey, did you take civics?" Or, yes, that happened. And now we're getting into a progress where it's the same thing over again. The Green Book, did you see the movie? Everything is not fiction, like the young brother was saying. People, white folks have a stereotypical type of attitude and the way of thinking, where they're so used to playing stupid or environmental service workers or something like that, to that effect. A lot of people didn't know about the sisters in NASA.
Tamina?
Yes.
I've gone to school from Head Start to the PhD level. Never did Hidden Figures come up.
I know.
Never did
I know.
Black Wall Street come up. Never did Allensworth come up in Central California. None of this came up. This was not on the curriculum.
I know.
And I went to school for lots of years. So it's a norm. We know about Christopher Columbus, and we know about Alexander the Great, and we know about blah, 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 blah. We live in a white supremacist.
I know about the Great Wall of China.
Exactly. So one thing that I just want to say, because what you're saying is also something that deserves its own show, is that one thing that'll be helpful, and this is to you too, Dante, is to learn to practice having compassion for other Black people.
Yes. Patience.
Because we be like, motherfucker, you don't know that. You know what I'm saying? And mad at Black people for being part of a system that they inherited at birth without their choice, that doesn't teach them about themselves. And in the midst of not knowing who they are, watching a media system that sometimes becomes the babysitter for working class parents who can't afford a real babysitter, they're sitting there getting self-hate lessons with a green dinosaur running through it that looks like a kiddie show. So we need to understand, those of us who have some residual level of consciousness, to stop being so mad at Black people and being abusive and dismissive to Black people for knowing nothing but English, the King's English, because we didn't choose this. So again, there's a lot to be said about what both you and Dante said, and we're going to get into those issues that you said previously, bringing up the TV shows. And somebody mentioned Kardashian, but we have to. One thing we can do immediately if we work on it is look at Black people and go, damn, look what white supremacy methodology has done. Instead of saying them GDNs or goddamn that word, that's some of the impulses that we have. One of the most famous intercommunity lines is Black people are our own worst enemy. And I say to Black people, but your name is Brittany Johnson. You have that name because of what the worst enemy did. You don't know nothing about Swahili or Igbo or any language that's indigenous to your cellular level. That's what your worst enemy did. So stop saying crazy stuff like Black people are our worst enemy. No, we're not our worst enemy. Our worst enemy set us up to turn on each other. Yeah, that's who the worst enemy is. Mm-hmm. So the point of that kind of commentary is it's a deconstruction triggering of how we look at the world, so we can stop being anti-Black and being participants in our own dismantling as a people. And sometimes in the name of helping Black people, we'll get mad at Black people and then traumatize other Black people.
Very true.
We got to stop doing that immediately if we want things to even feel like they can change. I mean, I'm off my soapbox, and it's a biodegradable soap.
So that's good to know, Cleo. But before we do wrap up, I know we still have Brother Patrick on the line, mm-hmm. and if we can get you to quickly tell us what's on your mind, Patrick, any questions. What was that, Duke?
Patrick is going to speak on behalf of the performer, to my knowledge. So yeah.
Okay.
Hey everybody.
Hey.
I'm really glad to be here. Excited about this. Love the work that you all do. I went to undergrad in Baltimore. I went to Morgan, so I'm very, so when I hear these like Baltimore accents, I get excited. It's like, yay, being back there. But there's a lot I was kind of even taking some notes about what I have to say, because a lot of this really does intersect in the arts, media, with the arts and what we see and what is visualized. And much of it is also about, who is supporting it and who is funding it. Mm-hmm. Right. And also there is a very intentional move and motive for people who are not Black, who are not of our experiences, to ensure that we don't necessarily have everything, or also ensure that our or to work towards seeing that our thoughts, processes, and what we hold and value is not of our own, because then when they're able to own it, they can do whatever they want with it and distort it, right? So let's go back a little bit. So I'm from Nashville, born and raised, and I'm back here working, teaching, and performing, as well as around the country and internationally too. But this reason I'm a professional opera singer. So the reason why I started studying voice was because I wanted to go to Fisk University and be a Jubilee singer. Now, being around Fisk University and also Tennessee State, where my parents went, and Harry Medical College and American Baptist College. So knowing like and especially Nashville is like the incubator. When we think about civil rights, Nashville was the incubator for civil rights, where they all came through American Baptist College. They came through Fisk. They came through Tennessee State and A&I State at the time and such. So it's very important to like think about that, but also going back. So when Fisk is founded, not by Black people, like many HBCUs, and I'm a huge HBCU advocate, but when these institutions are founded not by Black folks, and even some that were, the goal was about civilizing the Negro, right? There was always the question about what do you do with the Negro? Frederick Douglass says, like, it's like, the Negro problem, right? All of that. So what ends up happening is when Fisk is in dire straits, the white choir director from New York, George White, comes and says, we're going to put together a choir. And he puts together the choir. And the thing that was interesting about Fisk was it was not necessarily the same kind of normal school that you would have, like that was doing the hard work, like agriculture and industry and stuff. Fisk was educating the elites and such like that. So he was putting together this choir. And they started off singing the standard European classical rap of Mozart, Palestrina, all of that, Monteverdi. It goes on, and it wasn't hitting on nothing. Like nobody was buying it, nobody was selling it. As the legend goes, they sing. George White goes into a basement and hears the students singing these spirituals amongst themselves. And they say, and he says, "Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Let's sing these songs. Let's construct them. Let's perform these songs, and we'll construct them in the choral European standard of soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and perform these songs." And initially, the students, as the legend goes, the students said, "No, we don't want to sing those songs. These songs are for us, and we only want to sing them among ourselves and only to remember for ourselves." And sometimes we don't even want to remember because many of them have been enslaved themselves. I think only one of the original Jubilee singers was not enslaved. But he won out. They go and they do this. They sing these songs and they become a hit. And there's a portrait of the Jubilee Singers that hangs in Jubilee Hall, the oldest building in the South, erected for the education of African Americans. That was made by Queen Victoria. Now I bring that into the fray because even these very songs that had come out of the experiences of Black people, out of their own enslavement, was very much tailored and created and curated out of a white Eurocentric standard, right? So now this is kind of the model that we get of all of our music. And so the spiritual, I do like workshops on this where we talk about where the Negro spiritual goes as the raw spiritual and the concert spiritual and all of that. But even the same thing with Harry T. Burleigh, Antonin Dvorak, a Czech Republic American composer, encourages him to compose the Negro spiritual in the concert form for voice and piano that could be done in recital, right? So automatically we see from a very far back space that our experiences are already being codified and put into this concert space, into the European aesthetic. And then it keeps going. We have, of course, people herald Porgy and Bess. And I have many friends who've done Porgy and Bess. When I was at Morgan, we did it. And we had the first black woman to direct a major production of Porgy and Bess as our director. This was great. It was a wonderful experience. However, Porgy and Bess is not by Black people. Porgy and Bess is by the Gershwin brothers. And the Gershwins took a book, also not by Black people, by DuBose Haywood, and created a story about these folks, and they make money off of it and continue to make money off of it. Mm-hmm. The issue that I have is that I'm not messed up with people making their money. Now, I love my colleagues, and we've all done it. I've done Porgy and Bess's in concert form many times. The issue is that we don't have ownership and stake of it. And also these people who are taking our stories are also not putting anything back into our communities. So yes, they are putting the Black bodies on the stage. Mm-hmm. That's great. I was so happy. I had many friends who were in that Porgy and Bess at the Met. And the largest number, there was like 8 people from from Morgan that I went to school with, that I'm very close with, that were in that Porgy and Bess. That's all well and good. However, those were the only Black people that got checks. That did not benefit Catfish Row in South Carolina. That does not benefit the hood and the places in New York City where even Lincoln Center is. That is a part of that whole mass move to move Black people off, right? So that doesn't benefit anybody except for those who have created it and the house. Because the reason why they do Porgy and Bess is because they know they're gonna make money. The Met. I went to see the Mets Othello one year, and this was also after the big debacle of the blackface. They were like, okay, we don't want any more blackface in Othello. We don't want any more blackface in Aida, right? And so they took all of that out. And I saw Othello, and it was not the best production. It was not that great. So I knew that they needed something. So then when this Porgy and Bess came around, I was like, oh yeah, y'all need money. That's when everybody does it, because they need money and they need us to be there. So, and I think the other side too is about, and my biggest thing is about the ownership piece and also about who gets to control the narrative. I did a production, and I'm just giving these anecdotes because I think that'll help. Like I did a production of a new work where I was really the only Black person in the production. And here I was singing this part. And when it came to the part that was written for me, it was jazzy, it was swung, it was all those things. And I sing jazz, I sing all those things. However, as soon as I opened up the score, I listened to the MIDI, I worked on it. I said, oh, okay, you want me to coon. And the thing that was a mess was that I was like, okay, cool, I can do that. Initially, yeah. I was fine with it. I was fine with the problematic language. I was fine with just doing the sling and dance to get my check in to make the debut. Right.
So Patrick, I really appreciate the insight that you're bringing, especially as someone who's worked in the field. And what you're saying is extremely important in regards to economic control and basically just control of the narrative, period. If we can definitely have you back on to discuss this more, we are working towards, we went about 16 minutes over, and this is a great conversation, but we want to go ahead and wrap things up so that we can go ahead and get to the last portion of the show.
I just want to make note, we do see the comments, and even Caltaze said that we should do another one specific on this topic around artists. And so I do think that we'll be leaning heavy towards that. So please expect for us to reach out to you and whoever else wants to join for that conversation. I do want to stay lastly on topic as far as what we are saying as far as decoding the media. I actually have a slide here from a Dr. Stacey Patton, who is a professor and journalist here in Baltimore, who does a lot of work around child advocacy, preventing child abuse and making sure that we don't harm our children. But as a professor at Morgan, one of her jobs as a journalist is helping her students to understand and dissect media. And she created this slide that I have permission to use, and I hope you all have y'all pen and paper, because even though this is for college students, I believe that this is something that we should all be adopting into our households just as a general. So I'm just going to go through these bullet points. And for her class, her syllabus says that we will understand how media messages create meaning, identify who created a particular media message, recognize what the media maker wants us to believe or do, name the tools of persuasion used, recognize bias, spin, misinformation, and lies, discover the part of the story that's not being told, evaluate media messages based on our own experiences, beliefs, and values, create and distribute our own media messages, become advocates for change in our media systems. Such topics as the influence of advertising on content, the effects of media on our cognitive abilities, and the importance of real-world knowledge are addressed. And lastly, we will explore messages sent out from the media and how they implant themselves, often in a subtle manner, sometimes subliminally, in the real world of people, locations, and events. The goal is to better understand media content, media industries, and how they affect us all. And so I do hope that you all are able to take that into account. And if you don't know how to do those things, now that you know what the goal is, we can start working on how we can achieve those goals.
Ashe.
I think that was perfect. The perfect way to close out this broadcast with that simple instruction.
I have a quick comment though, real quick, I promise. There's a brother named well, he's not really a doctor, but he might as well be. He's so brilliant. But there's a brother named Neely Fuller. Some of you may have heard of him. His name is spelled Neely Fuller, Fuller. He is the person who inspired Dr. Frances Cress Welsing to do a lot of the work that she did. Anyway, I'm going to mess up his quote, but you'll get the meaning and you can go look him up and get the real quote from verbatim. But he says, if you don't understand white supremacy, you don't understand nothing. If you don't really have an analysis or clarity about the impact and the omnipresence of and the contamination of white supremacy as it impacts everything, then you might as well compete with Stevie Wonder in terms of who can see the best. Because you won't be able to see really well if you don't get where that is and how that impacts everything. But the most important part of that is that it can all be stopped and we can deflect its impact by doing a lot of the things that we've discussed, including what the sister just recommended through Duke's voice. This can be resolved, but not without work.
Great. All right. So with that being said, without further ado, this has been a great dialogue and we would love to continue it. We're going to definitely get back with everyone within the group as far as these topics and concepts that came up during this conversation. And we look forward to seeing each and every one of you again back on this broadcast. But
and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all you family out there who are tuned in via Facebook and whatever other platforms that we may be streaming from. Also, do not forget to go to YouTube. Yes, this will also be on YouTube for your viewing pleasure. Go to Melanated Solutions Media YouTube channel. All right. So peace, family, love, and blessings. Y'all be safe.
Be well.
Muchas.
Everyone. Ashe.